So for everybody online, we will try to do the best we can with the technology, the way it's set up. We'll line things up, hopefully. So you got kind of like a walking area. We'll be switching over from one laptop to another, just so everybody's aware if there's a little bit of a disconnect between that. If there's any discussions in chat, I would say that I'm going to turn to any board member to collect that information and pass it on to us somehow in room, or we'll just get to it afterwards. That said, tonight's agenda, real briefly, introductions. So welcome for everybody I was able to attend in person, and a bunch of new faces. Fantastic to see, and a bunch of faces that are coming back, which is also glad to see. For full disclosure, we had about 20 some odd people sign up, and we're about halfway there. So last month, I think we were kind of in the same boat. It's a slow process. I have a feeling that COVID is still slowing people down quite a bit. That said, again, we will be meeting monthly. I believe next month is the 1 month we will not have a session, because I believe it's the week of July 4th, and that whole week is kind of a mess. So there's no point in us having a chapter event. However, we have the next 3 meetings already posted on the website. So one of the advantages is that we have a great lineup of content coming. So check out our website. That's probably the best place to be informed of what's going on. 2 sessions today. Javier will be presenting, and I'll introduce him in just a second, on privacy, and I will be doing a second session that will not be broadcast, unfortunately. So we will be terminating the online session just due to the sensitivity of the material that I'll be covering. I may do a little bit of a swap in line just because my session will be cut off and folks online won't be able to see that. Just a quick up and coming events, which I guess I already covered. So moving on. Yeah, anything the 2 board members that are present, anything that you'd like to mention that I should cover?
Just a big thank you to Checkpoint for last month, presenting and picking up the food and picking up the drinks.
Great point. We do thank Checkpoint, and we look forward for them to actually be a sponsor, which they believe that they're going to step up, which is fantastic. We're always looking for opportunity for sponsorship.
If anybody's interested in joining or after, if they want to.
Oh yeah. For everybody here, we as you see at the bottom here, we will go probably to Roanoke after this. It's just down the road from here. And just a quick straw poll, even if you choose not to come, how many of you do you think that will attend? I know I'll be there. 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right.
Drinks are on site.
Yeah, drinks are covered. So this is the tap's going to be covered. 2 are sponsors. Aon, BlackBerry, Cylance, Cybereason. Thank you very much for being sponsors. IO Active, and then Microsoft is in the special category of donor. And if anybody's wondering why, it's because we are a not-for-profit and Microsoft matches time. So myself and Lori, who is also a board member, our time that we contribute to this organization is actually a donation. So if you happen to work for a company and you want to serve on our board and donate your time, it's an opportunity for that as well. There are 8 of us on the board. 3 of us are present today, and again, we all welcome you to our association. Physically, and Lori is online. At least I saw Lori is online. I don't know if anybody else joined since then. I want to thank all the board members for your hard work. You know, at the end of the day, we are a not-for-profit, even though we're a national organization, and there's over 400 chapters globally. And, you know, one of the things that I always laugh is in Korea, it happens to be the largest single chapter with 20,000 members. So that's our goal. I don't know how that's possible. So again, thanks for everybody for staying on the board. So to that said, and staying on time, because we have a packed full agenda tonight, tonight's presentation is from a good friend of mine who is a former Microsoft employee, no longer, because he just had to expand his career horizon. Javier Salido will cover a topic which I think is very important to all of us. It has to do with privacy and machine learning and ethics associated with that. So being somebody that previewed his deck, I can tell you it's a great topic area. And I'll let him kind of conduct on how he wants to ask questions. We should start switching over while this is a good time to switch over. So folks, if we cut out, that's a temporary thing. Oh, there we go. So now it's my big face.
Like the glasses.
And I have killed my video. So now you got that.
Perfect.
You can share. And we have that.
And
There we go.
perfect.
I
Just let me share on.
was gonna say is I only see you still.
Yeah. So, oh, here it is.
Oh, all right. So Joe, thanks a lot for being online, by the way. Joe, let us know if you can hear us or if you can't hear us.
Loud and clear.
Where's Joe?
Shmoo.
So he's back.
He's back.
Okay.
He disappeared, but he's back.
It's just like, yeah.
Yeah,
They're all back.
they're all back.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you
Loud and clear.
Okay,
Where is he coming
from the
from? I
room.
think he's coming from upstairs.
perfect.
Do me a favor, Joe, is mute everybody who's online, just so that in case somebody has a cat or a child or something like that running around.
Will
All
do.
right, Javier,
Okay,
all yours.
I'm going to sit down so that people can see me. Hello, good evening. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here with you today. Frank, thank you very much for the invitation. Can I just make sure that people online can see the screen and can hear me fine? Okay, perfect. Thank you. So as I get started, I do want to say, please feel free to interrupt me, ask questions. I'm happy to answer them. For those of you online, if someone in the audience could tell me if there is a question, I'll just stop and we can talk about it. Okay, so as Frank mentioned, my name is Javier Salido. I have been in the field of privacy for the last 14, 15 years. The bulk of that at Microsoft. I moved to Airbnb about a year and a half ago, and I've been working on privacy over there as well. Tonight, I am going to tell you a little bit about the evolution of privacy regulation, okay? That is going to be the first half of the presentation, the smaller half, if you will. And then I am going to move on to a topic that I really find fascinating, which is the intersection of machine learning, ethics, and privacy. And I am going to talk about why this is important today, even if you ignore the fact that it is the right thing to do, okay? So just before I begin, a quick disclaimer. And why is this not working? Sorry. Okay, so a quick disclaimer. The views that I am going to express tonight are mine personally. They are not those of my employer, neither my present employer, not my past employer. And the other part of the disclaimer is, despite the fact that I am beginning the presentation with a disclaimer, and despite the fact that I'm going to talk about the law, and despite the fact that I sound like an attorney sometimes, I am not an attorney. My background is as a PM and as a data scientist, and thus nothing I say tonight should be construed as legal advice. Okay. With that, onto the agenda. So 3 parts to the presentation. The first part I mentioned, I am going to talk about the evolution of privacy law, which is going to change significantly over the next 12 to 24 months. Then I will focus on privacy, ethics, and artificial intelligence and what the connection to the law is in there. And finally, I will talk about the future of machine learning, privacy, and ethics, and how it relates to the law. So we begin the evolution of privacy law, an increase in entropy. And that last claim is going to become clear as I get to the last slide of this section. First, however, I do want to point out the fact that the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, the first big and comprehensive law, privacy law that the world has shown us, turned 4 years exactly on May 25th, this past May 25th. Now that's 4 years of it having been enacted. It really has been around a little bit longer. You might recognize some of these things. I am quickly going to go through them because they are relevant. First, amongst the things that GDPR introduced is the 72-hour data breach notification to regulators. I'm sure that many of you in the audience have gone through the joys and wonders of having to do data breach notification, so that one you're familiar with. Enhanced privacy notice and consent, letting users actually know what data we are collecting and how the heck it is that we intend to use that data. Restrictions to personal data transfers outside the the European Union, which is a topic that keeps coming back and keeps giving. If you have heard about Schrems 2, that is a number of suits that have been filed in the European Union by an Austrian attorney, former student, I think he was Stanford or UCLA, one of the two. But while he was down here in the United States, he decided that our attitude towards privacy was not what it needed to be. So he went back to Europe and became a privacy advocate, and a very active one at that. Separate obligations for controllers and processors, that depends on whether you collect the data directly from your users or you are someone that processes personal data for another company. Data subject rights, this is a big one. It is the right that the European Union has conferred to all its citizens to show up to a company and ask that company to delete all the data that the company holds about them, or to produce a copy of that data. And this, along with many other provisions of GDPR, are some of the things that we're beginning to see spring up in new privacy laws that are being enacted here in the United States. Data protection impact assessments, which are documentation, the principles of data minimization and the prohibition to process special categories, and finally, what is called the right to object to automated processing, which has also been dot an explanation. Now, this might sound like a rosary of things that I am putting out there. They are in the law, but they might sound random. Actually, all of these things are having an impact already in large companies. In the United States, what I'm finding is that many companies have so far believed that this law doesn't apply to them, either because the type of business they run is very, very technical, or because the bulk of their customers are in the United States. Well, I'm sorry to inform you, that is about to change significantly. And that's in part what I'm going to talk about. Sorry, wrong computer. So since the enactment of GDPR, we have seen another 140 countries enact privacy laws. That's number one. Sorry. Okay. Okay, sorry. 140 countries have enacted privacy laws. Many of them kind of follow the general principles of GDPR, so that is fine. The bad news begins here in the United States. We have a legislative body, a federal legislative body that has been completely incapable of formulating even a proposal for a federal privacy law. And of course, states have decided to take action. The first one was California, that enacted the California Consumer Privacy Act in 2020. that confers California citizens rights very similar to the ones that European citizens have thanks to GDPR, and that is just the beginning. On January 2023, 5 new state laws are going to be enacted. The California Privacy Rights Act, Colorado Privacy Act, Connecticut Data Privacy Act, so on and so forth. And again, this is just the tip of the iceberg, the beginning. Now, some of these laws are inconsistent with others, which presents a challenge. And as if that was not enough, we also have other laws that have been enacted or are about to be enacted that are also, though strictly speaking, not privacy laws, they overlap with privacy laws. I'm talking about laws focused on the use of biometrics. Many companies have been burned recently by the very aggressive Illinois law on this subject, and that is not the only one. Biometric laws are being enacted in many, many parts of the world. There's laws pertaining government ID data. And as if that was not enough, the European Union is about to gift us with a literal tsunami of new regulation. We have the Digital Services Act that is going to focus mostly on social media. And if you think your company is not in the social media business, well, you have to think again, because if you do anything that even remotely resembles content management, content moderation, then this law probably applies to you. There is Digital Markets Act. That one is not that bad unless you work for Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Facebook, and Apple. These are the entities that are being targeted by this law. And if your company is not big enough, well, in a couple of years, it probably is going to be. Finally, we had those two are, by the way, are expected to be enacted during 2023. And finally, we have the Data Governance Act, which just by the name gives you an idea of where it is going, and the Artificial Intelligence Act that I am going to talk about in a moment. The interesting thing about all these last 4 laws is that all of them kind of begin by saying it is not the intention of this law to contradict what the GDPR says. And immediately after they say that, they go on to go against many of the provisions on GDPR. So dealing with these things is going to be extremely complex, extremely difficult. And that is one of the first points that I want to make, which is the complexity is going to derive from the fact that we have these different laws and the fact that how they apply changes depending on what is your point of collection. Are you collecting through cookies, collecting personal data through cookies? Which cookies, the essential ones or the non-essential ones? Are you collecting from which country? Are you collecting what type of data? Because these laws recognize different types of data. There is sensitive data like biometrics that I've already talked about, like genetic data, and also things like sexual orientation, religious beliefs, political affiliations, so on and so forth. So bottom line is you're going to have this matrix, this 3-dimensional matrix in which you have geography, type of data, and approved uses. And we are going to have to keep track of that, along with which specific laws apply to what. Bottom line, and this is the key point about this first section of the presentation, data governance is key, is going to become key. And this is one of the few audiences I feel comfortable with because you understand the importance of discipline in the management of data. Not only that, discipline in the taxonomy of data. And what we are going to see then is the need, and some of your companies may already have taken action in this. I know, for instance, that Microsoft has. We are going to need comprehensive metadata that precisely describes not only what types of data we're holding, but also what laws is that data subject to, what collection points and what geographic origin the data has. Now, that is just the beginning. Once we have all those tags, then we need to come up with policy, tools that are going to enable us to author policies that apply to the different data sets automatically, so that at least some of the burden of compliance can be eased off the compliance team. They will only have to maintain these policies and make sure that they get enacted. Finally, on top of that, we have access controls. Now, this is one audience that I don't need to explain, to which I don't need to explain what RBAC and JIT are. However, there are other things that we are going to have to start considering, which is as we grant someone access to a particular data set, we are going to have to make sure that that individual is aware of the policies that apply to that particular data set. We're going to have to ask for attestation in addition to whatever approvals the organization requires. And as if that was not enough, we are also talking about making sure that they have the specific types of training that applies to that particular data set. Why? Because it's not only privacy we need to worry about. There are many other laws that are going to apply, like the ones I mentioned in the previous slide, and also depending which business you are, HIPAA might apply to you, the Federal Credit Reporting Act might apply to you, something else I am sure is going to apply to you. So that is the world that we are going to see. That is the world that we should be expecting, and that is a world in which privacy and security are going to have to work very closely together. Okay, so that is the gloom and doom part of the presentation. Any comments or questions? No. Okay. So let me go on then. Now, I did mention when I went through the brochure of stuff that GDPR introduced, that there was this last portion, which is the right to object, which is also being dubbed as the right to an explanation. And that is the key point that launches us into the world of ethics and artificial intelligence and the overlap between privacy and those two. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about Article 22 of the General Data Protection Regulation that confers European citizens the rights not to be subject to automated processing that produces legal effects or significant other harm unless they consent. What that means is, if your system is going to apply some heuristic or is going to be running some machine learning model that is going to make a decision about the user, a decision that potentially harms the user, possibly by denying them opportunities or by denying them a service, then you cannot use that unless the user consents, right? So if you are perhaps granting credits or credit cards or access to universities in some way, shape, or form, and your process is entirely based on an algorithm or on a machine learning model, you are going to have to ask the user for an okay. Now, even if the user says that he is okay, she is okay with you employing automated decision-making, you have this other section of the same article that says that even if they consent, if they don't agree with the results of your algorithm, with the output of your machine learning model, then they have a right to object to that decision. And of course, if they have the right to object, and if they have the right to human intervention in the process, what do you think is going to be the first question that they are going to ask after they object? Well, they're going to ask why, right? Why am I being rejected? Why am I being declined? Why are you saying no to me? And that is why this article has been dubbed the right to an explanation. We are going to have to explain ourselves. Now, when it comes to machine learning, there's a catch there. And the catch, yes.
Maybe I do have a question about that particular. So let's take the scenario here where it is a call center, like a support line. That goes through some kind of an automated ML decision and it routes. A lot of the answers are automated answers, so they can filter out 70% of calls. Could you see this becoming a potential risk for those companies that don't staff sufficient support organizations?
The key is on whether that structure causes harm, right?
Harm and support.
Right. The harm is in support, but is that material harm to the user? Maybe not. It depends on what kind of company you are and on what is the final impact of that harm, right? So if you're denying them services, if you're denying them opportunities, then yes, that would fall under this statute.
Man, it's like, I'm just thinking of airlines. That's why, that's the first thing that came to mind.
Oh yeah,
Talk
Delta
about harm
Airlines.
is, I missed my flight is canceled, my flight has changed without my intervention, just an ML made that decision. Why did my flight change?
Oh, okay. But in that case, so let's separate the decision to cancel the flight, which if made by an automatic decision-making entity, then it would fall under this provision. Yeah. Separate that from the call for the explanation. The call for the explanation, and I'm not an attorney, I'm not a regulator, but based on my experience, what I would expect to see is you don't have to provide immediate answer, but you have to provide an answer within a reasonable period of time. Now, what reasonable means? Well, I'd rather not find out from the regulator. Other questions? No? Yes.
Is the significant harm defined in any way? I mean, is there like a litmus test as to like significant harm?
I mean, that's it.
The credit score.
Right.
And thinking, okay, so if somebody pays a higher percentage, is that significant harm, or is it only if denied credit?
It could be. Now you're moving into the terrain of potential discrimination, right? And that's a lot harder to prove. And that's something, in fact, I'm going to be talking about in a moment, right? Now, with respect to the definition of harm, it has to be, as I understand, it has to be material harm. This is a question for an attorney, by the way. It has to be material harm. It has to be something that denies opportunities, that denies a service, that blocks the user from something that he or she should otherwise expect, right?
I was going to say, there's material harm. Oh, just in case you're not aware, Jake, who happens to be on our board, is also an attorney.
Okay. Okay,
He
perfect.
happens to be an attorney, so.
Okay, great. No, and if I see something that
My
is
primary practice.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's why I at the beginning mentioned this is my interpretation. My attorneys would kill me if I pretended that this was Airbnb's understanding of the law, right? So anyway, continuing with this, when we think about machine learning, the promise that we hear is that machine learning is going to make everything faster, everything more accurate, right? Because it's a data, so there's no ambiguity in the data. Nothing can be wrong if we're using data, so on and so forth. And oh, by the way, this is also going to lower the cost, right? So it just so happens that when we look at machine learning, besides other considerations about fairness and discrimination and all of that, let's just focus on the issue about having to explain what it is that we're doing when we use a machine learning model. there is this well-known trade-off between what is called performance and what is called interpretability, right? And in machine learning, what we mean by interpretability is the decision of the model something that can be understood by a human being? So if you have access to the model and to the output of the model, can you as a human being understand why the final decision about one instance, one case is what it is, or can you not? And this is just a fact, right? Depending on the type of algorithm that you're using, depending on the type of model you employ, it is going to be interpretable or it is not. So at the bottom right here in this Cartesian plane, we see decision trees and linear and logistic regression. Those are types of models that are known to be interpretable, right? In a decision tree, you can actually follow the tree and see what decision is being made at each step, and therefore interpret how you arrived to the final decision for one particular person. The problem is that these models are generally not as well performing as the other type of model that you see here in the upper left. That is, yes?
What do you mean by, what does performance mean in this case?
Well, it depends on how you have defined it, right? The standard performance measures that are used in machine learning could be accuracy. In how many cases did you get things right? If you say yes, were you right? Then that's good. If you say no, and it was a no, then that is good. But in some cases, you get false positives or false negatives, and it is the rate between the number of instances that you got right and the total number of instances that you're looking at that is going to define the accuracy.
Doesn't this get a little circular at times? It's like, how do we know if someone's creditworthy if it's all based on an algorithm?
Right. So that's where the training data comes into play. These measures cannot be accurately measured on new instances because you don't know, right? You can only know after a certain number of years who ended up paying and who ended up defaulting, right? So that's the way that you measure these things. Of course, in many instances, it's much easier. The time horizon is not as long as it is for a mortgage. Right. Okay. So that's what I mean by performance, and accuracy is not the only measure. There are quite a few: precision, recall, so on and so forth. But bottom line is what? Yes.
There's also some modeling based on non-statistics, Gaussian curve distribution, non-distribution can allow some machine models to predict results like without calibration or long term.
Right. Okay. So. Bottom line is, if you examine high-performance machine learning models today, you will see that most of them are in that upper left quadrant. Things like deep learning and boosted trees. And for that type of model, it doesn't matter how smart you are. It doesn't matter if you have access to the algorithm, the code, the data. It doesn't matter if you have a Nobel Prize in machine learning. You are not going to be able to explain how the machine learning algorithm, the machine learning model arrived at the decision. You simply cannot, okay? The mathematical relationships in there are so complex that they're not understandable by human beings. And this presents a problem, of course, because if Article 22 at some point is going to require us to be capable to explain these decisions, and we're using high performance models as we need to if we want to make our business successful, then we run into a wall. Now, the good news is that there are tools that can help us provide some level of interpretability, right? This is an example. So what you see here is a machine learning model that predicts whether a person is going to be making more than how likely a person is going to be how likely it is that a person can make more than $50,000 a year based on a number of inputs, right? And just for the purpose of this conversation, we're going to assume that if the model says, yes, you're likely to make $50,000 a year, then you're going to get the mortgage or the car loan, or whatever it is that you're asking for. And if the model says, no, you're not likely to be making more than $50,000 a year, you're going to be turned down. So the way to interpret this graph is anything that is orange. By the way, I think it's orange. I'm colorblind, so if you see red, I'm talking about everything that is to the right of the zero, right? So anything that is to the right of the zero is good. Anything that is to the right of the zero is adding to your probability, or to the probability that you make more than $50,000 a year. Anything that is to the left, in other words, anything that is blue, is actually acting against you. Now, we look at the data in this particular instance, and you can see that right at the top of the column of variables, we have capital gains. And the information that is between parentheses is how much this particular person that we're looking at in this instance, how much they are making in capital gains alone. You can see that this person is making almost $28,000. So between 28,000 and 50,000 is only 22,000, which means it pretty much doesn't matter what sort of employment the person has. It's highly likely that he's going to be making $50,000 a year, right? And by the way, I know that this is a he because if you look down the column, gender is there, and it's clear that he is male. So we can see that the main reason why the model believes that this person is likely to make more than $50,000 a year is just the capital gains. There are other things that play into that person's favor, like the number of hours per week that he works, the number of years that he has gone through education. He's even presumably halfway through a bachelor's degree there. The fact that he is male, all of that counts in his favor. Against him is the fact that he's a farmer, that he's 25 years old. Younger people tend to make less money than older people. So all of this looks fine, okay? Now, just for comparison, let's take a look at a case in which the model is saying this person doesn't make more than $50,000 a year. And once again, you can see that age in this case is playing against that person. He's only 18 years old. He only works 25 hours a week. He's not finished high school because that's only 11 years, and so on and so forth. Now, this is great because now we can provide some level of explanation. By the way, these techniques can be applied even to non-interpretable models. So good news, right? However, this tool does something else. It gives us the capability to do something else. These interpretations that we're looking at here are local interpretations, right? Which means they apply to a single person, the person whose data we can see there. However, the same set of tools can enable us to look at how each variable overall impacts the results of the model. In other words, on average, how much does age impact the output of the model? How much does capital gains impact the output of the model? And if we look at that, if we look at the global interpretation, that is the one that tells us on average how much a variable impacts the output. If we look at that in the case of race, then we find this, right? And this is a problem. Yes.
Race, male, gender, age, all these factors should be considered. Something might be illegal, discriminatory.
Exactly. That is exactly the point, right? We get to see, right? We get to see that in this case, race diminishes. So think of the zero as the average impact that race has on the population's results, right? So on average, for the whole population is zero. And anything below zero is diminishing the chances of that person of making more than $50,000 a year. And anything above zero is increasing the chances for that person. And oh boy, I missed the tagging of the x-axis, but I can tell you that the leftmost column here, the one that is reducing the chances of a person by 0.5, applies to Native Americans and Eskimos, right? And negative 0.5 is significant. This is a logarithmic scale, logit scale. And negative 0.5 is equivalent to a 38% reduction in the chances that this person makes more than $50,000 a year, okay? The next column to the right, the second one, applies to Asians. So Asians are actually doing pretty well in here, right? The race increases their chances. The next column, the third one, applies to Black people. The fourth column applies to other, which would include Hispanics. And the final column on the far right applies to white. So what this is telling us is the model is actually taking into account race. And in some cases, particularly if you're an American Indian or an Eskimo, but also if you're Black or you're Hispanic, then this is going to impact you negatively, right? And that's where we have to start asking questions. There are discrimination considerations, but there are also ethical concerns. Questions so far? Yes.
Well, one thing that I was thinking about is for this particular scenario, it'd be a little bit hard to cheat the system, but having exposure to this information could also potentially position bad actors to know how to game the system too.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, I haven't thought hard about this, but these techniques definitely would have application in security. We need to think about those. Anyway, so we see how this right to an explanation is quickly moving us onto terrains that have traditionally for the last 5-10 years, been considered part of the ethics frameworks. And Microsoft has probably one of the most comprehensive ethics frameworks for artificial intelligence that I am, at least out of the ones that I know. And that is exactly what we're seeing here. This is not the full framework, but just the part. So the framework talks about fairness and inclusiveness, which in this case, in the particular case that I am showing you, would apply to no harm to users, right? We don't want to withhold opportunities, which is exactly what Article 22 of GDPR is talking about. It also talks about transparency, which in this case I'm interpreting as the right to an explanation. The fact that we can tell the user why the model is acting in the way it is acting. Then comes the hard part, which is accountability. If we know that our model is unfair, then we need to take corrective action. We need to be accountable for the problems that we generate. And there is a significant body of work in that area. Also, I'm talking also about technology in this case, that explains what to do in these cases. However, that particular body is a little bit controversial because it implies you manipulating in some cases, manipulating the inputs to the machine learning model, and in other cases, manipulating the outputs. And some people believe that that is not okay. Anyway, bottom line is these techniques exist, they can be applied. Finally, we have privacy and security here, which is, I'm focusing mostly on the fact that the inputs, the inferences that models make about you are also, or should also be considered in most cases, personal data. Even if they are not accurate, there is some level of accuracy in those results that we need to take into consideration. So this is the frame of the problem, right? The law is pushing us into understanding certain things about the model, the way our models work. The tools enable us to do that, and we have to take action. So that takes me to the future and what I see, and again, this is my personal opinion, the close correlation that there is between these problems that I have just pointed out and one of the laws that we see in the horizon. And that is the Artificial Intelligence Act, right? So the scope of the Artificial Intelligence Act is systems that influence the environment they interact with. It could be machine learning, it could be expert system, Bayesian approaches, or statistical approaches. Mere statistical approaches may be interpreted as falling under the purview of the Artificial Intelligence Act. This act classifies three different types, three different categories of systems, three different categories of artificial intelligence: those that are prohibited, those that are high risk, and those that are limited risk, right? It places significant documentation and governance requirements over those that are high risk, something comparable to the requirements that GDPR places on us today. And this act is probably going to be enacted within the next 2-3 years. Now, that's just the general aspect of the act, if you will. Let's take a look at what are the prohibited uses, right? Subliminal techniques to manipulate a person's behavior in a way that may cause physical or psychological or physical harm. Exploit vulnerabilities of any group of people due to their age, physical or mental disability, and in a way that may cause physiological or physical harm. Enable governments to use general purpose social credit scoring and real-time remote biometric identification in publicly accessible venues that is used by law enforcement.
Isn't China deliberately right now doing that social credit scoring?
No, it's a default.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, isn't that principally what they do and how they actually give credit?
Yeah, basically.
Is it, I mean, of course, it's the European Union that would do this. I mean, it doesn't, it's pretty obvious, like, all of those companies that you mentioned at the start of your talk, none of them came out of Europe for a reason.
Yeah.
Over regulation. It's, one could argue. This is even scarier though, because if we don't at least understand some of these uses, how could we defend against them if they're deployed against us?
Right.
I'm gonna go hide in the forest.
So, well, I mean, the good news is that they are prohibited, right? Yes.
So the first one up there,
Uh-huh.
I mean, isn't that Instagram's business model?
Instagrams? Yeah.
I would say TikTok more than Instagram.
Yeah.
So it's all of social media.
Uh-huh.
Psychological harm. I mean, how many times have we heard that kids
Yeah.
or adults or anyone is stuck doing death scroll and
Girls are being shamed.
come
Yeah.
out with psychological harm?
Yeah. And if you own Facebook stock, you probably should be selling it right about now. Yeah. Well,
Is that legal advice?
yeah.
Something happened way before it. Algorithms, like, we don't know about Facebook and Instagram.
Yeah.
Aren't those,
I'm thinking on
aren't
that.
those algorithms kind of, aren't they examples of early ML? I mean, really, those like the news feeds, like particularly.
Yes.
I mean, those to me, like, this is, like, that is just early examples of all this stuff.
Early examples of application of machine learning to
Yeah,
this.
exactly.
Yes, yes, yeah, correct.
Advanced correlation.
Yeah.
That
Well,
seems to make sense to people.
Yeah, I mean, like, so TikTok needs one metric to do their magic, which is the amount of time, the dwell time of what's on the screen. That's it. That's all they use. And they can, their friggin' algorithms. So so scary.
Right.
The algorithm doesn't need to be complex, right? I mean, this could be simple.
Yeah,
with AI.
it can be very, in
It
fact,
could be a decision tree.
it doesn't even have to be AI. It just has to be an algorithm that makes a decision without human intervention, right? Now, before you exhale a sigh of relief because what you do is not here, I wouldn't be so sure. One of the challenges that I have run into is that what is technically true is not necessarily what regulators understand, right? So even though technically speaking, the definition of something tells you this is not biometrics, for instance, let's say that face recognition, and this is a problem I have seen a couple of times. We know what biometrics are. If we're technically savvy, we understand what biometrics means, and we can draw a clear line between machine learning algorithms, machine learning models that are using biometrics and those that are not. However, if you're using a non-biometric approach that turns out to be really, really good at distinguishing between people, then most likely the regulator is going to interpret that as being using biometrics. So in here, the interpretation that counts is not yours, is that of the regulator. If you get called, you're going to have to explain yourself. And if the explanation is not satisfactory, then your business or some aspect of your business might fall under one of these categories, right?
And ultimately, it's going to come down to a judge.
Yes.
That's what ultimately will matter the most. And I think some of this stuff's going to result in tech companies leaving Europe rather than submit to these rules. They may just go.
Actually, Facebook has already threatened to do that.
I think
Recently.
many of them have.
Yeah.
Over the years.
Okay, now those are the prohibited uses. Let's take a look at high risk. Okay, these are not prohibited. And the next slide, I will explain what are the requirements to handle a high risk case. But let's first take a look at what are considered high risk cases. Anything that is critical infrastructure where AI may put people at risk. Would that include data centers? Maybe, I don't know, most likely, in my opinion. Educational, vocational settings where AI determines access to education and training. So what I don't recall what the British entity that does the final exams for high school is called, but during the pandemic, they actually replaced exams with some machine learning algorithm that turned out to be a total failure, but that kind of thing would fall under this category, right? Anything related to worker management, which could be worker performance and self-employment, essential private and public services, including financial services, law enforcement and administration of justice, no algorithms deciding who should go to jail, and migration, asylum, and border control. Now, once again, if you think your business doesn't fall under one of these categories, then you need an attorney, because it's not your interpretation that counts, it's whatever interpretation the regulator or the judge is going to make. Now, let's take a look at what are the requirements if you fall under one of these categories. First of all, documentation that shows compliance with AI Act prior to being placed in the EU market. This is akin to what we call today a privacy impact assessment in the privacy world, which is if you have gone through one, you know that well done, if they are properly done, these are extremely detailed reviews of how you are collecting, processing, storing, sharing, and getting rid of data. And the level of detail I'm talking about reviewing if properly done. We're talking about reviewing database schemas, understanding exactly where each data element is coming from, what type of laws it is subject to, data flow diagrams, not exactly the same type of data flow diagrams that you use in security, but something similar, and on goes the thing. That's the first type of requirement. Then as for technical and auditing requirements, regular testing of the system to identify risk and mitigations. That testing of the system is it performing properly, or do you need to retrain your model because it is out of date? It also means that you have to employ the types of interpretability tools that I just showed you in order to understand if your model is being fair to the population that you're addressing, or if it is not, and several other requirements. Data governance controls, including training and test sets that are completely error-free. This one just kills me. I don't know. I mean, of course, there are many cases in which this is feasible, but completely error-free. What do you mean by error, first of all, and how do you make sure that a data set is error-free in some cases, right? Detailed technical documentation, including architecture, algorithm design, and model specifications, transparency to allow users to interpret the system's output, and finally have the capability to turn it off. Why doing that last capability? Because the regulator might actually ask you to turn it off at some point. So this level of detail, this level of documentation, this level of discipline is akin to GDPR. And it's going to be added on top of the requirements that GDPR places on us, on top of whatever requirements the Data Governance Act places on us, and on top of any requirements that any of the other laws that I mentioned at the beginning, or any other laws that might apply to your company, come into play. So this is the world that awaits us. And my point with all of this is, even if you ignore the fact that applying these responsible AI or ethical AI frameworks, even if you decide that the fact that they are the right thing to do is not something you're going to care about, the point here is it makes sense from the business point of view, because if you're not ready for this, then it's going to be chaos, and there's a good chance that the regulator is going to come after you. Regulators are becoming savvier thanks to the GDPR. They are building their staffs, they are building their knowledge, and they are getting used to the kinds of things. They are getting a good idea of the kinds of questions that they need to ask in order to find out if you're following the law or you're not following the law. So bottom line is my conclusion. First, privacy and data protection regulatory landscape is getting really, really complex, okay? It is essential to have a good data governance program and tools that help you deal with this complexity. Then, talking about artificial intelligence, it is the next big regulatory frontier. Everyone understands that, particularly in the EU. So adoption of comprehensive frameworks and tools for responsible use of artificial intelligence are really the only thing today that we have available that can show us the way to deal with this new wave of regulation. And that's basically what I have for you. Any other questions?
That last point, for a lot of things, frameworks is the way to go, right? Instead of rebuilding something, you adopt a framework. Are there any emerging frameworks that are already trying to get ahead of the curve that maybe people are adopting?
I don't know about adoption really, but in my opinion, based on what I know, and I have been working on this for the past 3-4 years, I find that perhaps Microsoft is the most advanced one. Not only in terms of, not only because it is comprehensive, but also because Microsoft has done significant work in developing tools that enable us.
Share?
Yes. In fact, the diagrams that I showed you for interpretability are coming straight out of a Microsoft tool that is called InterpretML, that is available as an open source package, a Python package on the internet. They also have tools for fairness, and they have tools for other aspects of the framework. Yes.
As with any regulation, is there a minimum threshold of revenue or company size or anything that AI Act applies to some companies?
I don't know. I cannot speak to that. I mean, depends on the regulation. So we mentioned at least one of those regulations really applies only to the big five or the next five. I don't know at this point in time, and I don't think it's been decided what the threshold would be, for instance, for the AI Act, right?
Javier, thank you very much for your time. Fantastic presentation.